Libyan rebels are getting their strongest sign of support yet. Dozens of world leaders have convened in Paris to discuss ways to help the transitional government lead the way out of the Muammar Gaddafi era. Meanwhile, Gaddafi remains on the run and vowing not to give up the fight. CBS's Tina Krause has more.
Muammar Gaddafi says NATO forces are trying to occupy Libya and steal its oil. In a late-night address on a Syrian TV station, Gaddafi promised his supporters will do whatever it takes to keep control of the North African country. Fighters say they are close to catching Gaddafi, who's believed to be hiding in the desert south of Tripoli. His sons are giving mixed messages. One offered to negotiate a truce. The other vowed to fight to the death. Libya's future is the focus for world leaders in Paris. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton joined 60 world powers to hear what rebels need to stabilize the nation. Clinton urged Libyans to seek reconciliation, not revenge.
What happens in the coming days will be critical, and the international community has to help the Libyan people get it right.
Libya's interim government wants access to billions of dollars of Gaddafi's assets that are frozen around the world. Rebels got their hands on the first shipment of cash overnight to keep the battle going. Hundreds of Libyans loyal to Gaddafi fled their homes in the capital and say they live in fear of the rebels. She says they told us we will return and wipe you out. But most Libyans are celebrating the end of Gaddafi's reign on this 42nd anniversary of his rise to power. They're snapping photos of his shattered compound and driving freely over images of his face. Tina Krause, CBS News.
CBS News foreign affairs analyst Pamela Falk is in Paris this morning. Pam, good morning to you.
Good morning, Terrell.
You were at the conference. If there was one underlying message to take away, what would that be?
That's that the new government wants humanitarian aid. They want some advice, really, on how to govern. And all they want is the international community to play a backseat role so that Libya is seen by the world and by its own people as winning its own revolution.
Pam, doesn't that seem like there is a lot of faith being put into that new government? Is that the right move right now, or should we wait until we find out more about who's going to be in charge?
Well, this seems to be a government, the Transitional National Council, that has been formed by several different groups, by human rights activists, by political prisoners, and by many representing many of the different tribes of Libya. Now, they are promising elections within 8 months, which is fairly record speed, but they do seem to represent all of the different groups. What you are seeing since the Paris conference, this one, the summit, was announced, are some divisions that are surfacing between and among the different tribes when they came into Tripoli. But I think that's somewhat expected. Revolutions or civil wars are messy, and that's what you're seeing. This is a government that seems to be representative.
And the rebel forces still have the help of NATO. Do we know how much longer that's going to last?
Well, that's the other question. They want humanitarian aid. They want the freezing of the Gaddafi assets, and they want NATO to continue. And that's one of the big issues. The NATO chairman has said that they will go to the end, and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said the same thing, in addition to her announcement that she was releasing some funds to the government. The good news for the international community is that Libya doesn't need money per se. In other words, it has 2% of the world's exports of oil. It is the 9th largest reserve of oil in the world. But it needs short-term capital, and that's what it wants right now. And the battle is not over, and that's your point, Terrell, or question, that they do need NATO support still because, as we heard in your report and at the conference itself at the Élysée Palace, Gaddafi was beaming in, telling people to be defiant.
So is there any way that Gaddafi could somehow resume power or take on more power or come back to power?
I don't think so, but the fighting is not ended. It doesn't seem that Gaddafi could come back, and there's certainly no flexibility, with good reason, by the rebels to have him negotiate his way back into some kind of coalition, or his sons. But it can continue the fighting, and Iraq is the lesson learned for the Libyans and for the international community as well as the U.S., and that is make sure there's not, in the Iraqi case it was sectarian fighting, in this case it may be tribal fighting, but pro-Gaddafi forces could really injure the ability of the new provisional government to continue and to thrive.
All right, we'll continue to keep an eye on it, and we know you will too. CBS News Foreign Affairs analyst Pamela Falk in Paris joining us by phone this morning. Pam, thank you so much.
Absolutely, Terrell. Good to be here.